Hello everyone. In this video, we'll dive into the activities for Chapter 5 using our sample company, Mookie the Beagle, to explore customer and sales transactions. In this chapter, you'll work with customers, projects, and the products and service list. We've already practiced creating invoices and setting up services in the product service list previously, so this won't all be brand new, but now we'll bring those pieces together in real customer workflows. You'll learn how to record key customer-related transactions in QBO, including invoices, sales receipts, and the receive payment screen. These tools all track money coming into the business, but each one fits a different situation. So to create transactions in QBO, typically you mouse over the Create button, and since we're focused on sales-related transactions, we're in this column labeled Customers. And we're going to talk about several of these transactions now. So invoices, use this when you provide the services now or goods now, but you're going to get paid later. The customer hasn't paid. So this form is going to create an increase in your accounts receivable to show that the customer owes you. It's also going to show an increase to the revenue accounts because you have provided the goods or services, so you have earned the right to collect from the customer. The receive payment form is used when you're collecting money on a past invoice. So in order to use this form, you have to have previously created an invoice for a customer, and now you're collecting on that invoice. You're collecting on account. This is going to reduce your accounts receivable, showing that the customer owes you less money. It's also going to increase either your balance in your checking account, or it's going to increase the balance of the payments to deposit account, depending on how the customer paid you. The sales receipt form is used when the customer pays immediately for a cash sale. That'll increase your revenue, and it will also increase either the balance of your checking account or the balance of your payments to deposit account, depending on how the customer paid. Over here in this column, we have the bank deposit. We've seen those before. How they relate to these transactions with customers is that if the customer paid you in the form of cash or maybe a check, then you're going to have to deposit that cash or check at a later time. So this could come after a sales receipt or after a receipt payment transaction because that check or that cash needs to be dropped off at your bank. This transaction in those cases would decrease the balance of payments to deposit and increase the balance of your checking account. There are a couple other customer-related forms that we'll be talking about this chapter. One would be the estimate form. This is used when you give a customer a quote before the work is done. The credit memo form is used to record a reduction of what the customer owes. For example, if you billed the customer $100 for some grooming, but you gave a $20 discount because the service was not up to the customer's expectation, that would reduce revenue and reduce the accounts receivable because the customer would owe you less because you gave them a break on the price. The refund receipt form is used when you actually return money the customer has already paid. The delayed credit form is used to record a credit you'll apply later against a future invoice. For example, if you're giving a $15 future discount for a loyal customer's next grooming appointment, you'd use that form. And then finally, a delayed charge is a charge that you plan to bill the customer later. For example, you track $50 of extra boarding fees now, but you won't invoice the customer until at the end of the month. I realize that's a lot of information to sort of take in at once, but we'll be taking a look at most, if not all, of these different forms as we work through the chapter. So the first thing we're going to do in the program today is take a look at the customers list. So to get to that, I'm going to mouse over My Apps. I am going to go to the Customer Hub and then select Customers. And we can see the customers that we've already entered into the system as well as the sub-customers. You can see the sub-customers because their names are indented underneath the customer that they belong to. So we use sub-customers for the pets, and the main customer there is the human. To manually create a new customer in the list, we can click on this New Customer button. If we had an Excel file or a CSV file with a bunch of customers' contact information and other details, we can click on this drop down and we can import customers in that way. At the end of this chapter, I will take a look at that. But for right now, we're just going to follow the book and we're going to manually enter the details for a customer. As you can see, there are many fields of information that we can record about an individual customer. This is a time-saving feature. Each time we enter a new transaction for a particular customer, we can use information from the customer list instead of continually re-entering the information over and over for each sales transaction. It's also nice information to have if we need to contact any of the customers. So we're going to do this for a new customer named Sherry Bryan. And then I'm just going to follow the textbook and enter all the contact information that has been provided. So as you can see, I've entered the information for Sherry Bryan per the details provided in the textbook: the name, mobile number, address, and preferred payment method, terms, and the sales form delivery options. And also, another nice feature here is that we can specify the language to use when we send this customer invoices. There are a limited number of languages available here, but this may be a handy feature. Now, from my experience, by specifying this language, what it does, it just basically it changes the language for the columns within the invoice. It doesn't change the email that you send to them, so you might need to rewrite that in the preferred language of the customer, but it might help. And since I've entered all those details for that customer, I'm just going to hit save. In addition to adding customers from the customer hub and just hitting this green new customer button, you can also create customers if you're inside of one of the customer transaction forms. So for example, I was inside an invoice and I'm trying to invoice a customer, they're not in the system, I could just hit add customer here and then add new, and then I could enter those details and save as well. So a couple different ways to add new customers. And once again, you can also import if you already got a big list in a CSV or an Excel file, and I'll show you that at the end of the video here. So I'm going to close out of this invoice, and now I am going to mouse over my apps and I'm going to select projects. The projects is a feature in QBO that allows us to set up projects linked to our customers. It allows us to transactions and profitability by project, which may provide us with better information to make decisions. Now, we've already done that in a way through creating sub-customers for each pet that are tied to the customer, which is the pet owner. And what we're going to do here, though, today is talk a little bit about projects and why this might be a better approach. Basically, the main advantage of projects over sub-customers is that you get this project dashboard and you get a little bit more reporting capability from the software. So you can see I don't have any projects in here yet, but you got the project, the customer it belongs to, the income versus the cost or expenses, the profit margin, the amount of time that you spent, and the start date and end date. So you get this this dashboard here for all your different projects, and you get a little bit more reporting power for the projects than you do for the sub-customers. So right now we're going to start a new project to sort of show how this looks, and then we're going to convert our sub-customers that we've already created into projects in a moment. So to start a new project, we come up here to the top and click on the New Project button. And the first thing we have to do is give the project a name. So we're going to call it Maggie. That's the name of a pet. And the pet's owner, we're going to select here for the customer. And Maggie belongs to Sherry Bryan. Next, we're going to hit the Save button to save the project. And we haven't recorded any transactions related to Maggie yet, so there's no income or costs or any details showing up here yet. Now, since we already do have some of our pets in the system as sub-customers, that's what we're going to do next, is convert those sub-customers into projects. And then we can see the reporting that we can do, because we do have some income and costs, I believe, for those existing sub-customers currently. So to do that, I'm going to get back to the main project screen. So one way to do that, mouse over my apps, go to projects, then projects again. There we go. We see that one that we just created without any income or costs yet. And now to convert those existing sub-customers into projects, I'm going to click on this drop-down arrow and I'm going to select Convert from Sub-Customer. You can see the two sub-customers listed. I'm going to convert both of them. So I'm going to check this box to select both of them. And then I'm going to click the Convert button in the bottom right. Getting a confirmation screen that we're going to convert two sub-customers to projects, and we'll click Continue. Once we do this, it can't be undone. And we got a confirmation telling that it was done. Now you can see the three projects because we've converted the two sub-customers and we created the new one. The two sub-customers did have income associated with the pets, so we see that here. So far we haven't recorded any expenses that we've tracked to individual pets, although we could have. If you remember back, I believe it was in chapter 3, we entered that non-scheduled recurring expense for the contractor Evan Henry, and he did some work with the two pets. But when we recorded that transaction, we didn't split out the expense between the two pets, although we definitely could have. You can see here from that original expense entry, this is the transaction that we recorded previously, that I could have specified the individual pets, and then I would have had, because this total was for two different pets, I would have had the two different line items and then marked the two different pets. But the book doesn't seem to want us to go back and edit that transaction, so I'm not going to, but I just sort of wanted to mention it because there were some expenses so far that we've recorded that could be directly traced to those individual projects, to those individual pets. So getting back to the project screen, so I can click on any one of the pets here, any one of the projects, and then I get some more details. So I've got margins, I've got invoices. If I click on this transactions tab, I can see all the transactions related, and there's a lot more detail that we can look at with these projects. So basically, projects get a lot more reporting power than the sub-customers, and that's why this might be a better solution than the sub-customers for this pet care business. Another cool feature too is that once I pulled up this particular pet, Bella, I can record transactions directly related to Bella by clicking on this add to project. And for example, I could do maybe another invoice right here, and it's already going to pre-fill with the Bella and the Carlos Zafra being the customer, Bella being the project, Carlos being the. So it might save you a little bit of time and make the workflow a little easier to create the invoices from that project screen. But I'm not creating an invoice right now, so I'm going to close that out and I'm going to leave without saving. And one last thing that I'll mention here is if I click on this action button for each individual project, each individual pet, you can see I have some choices here where I can mark as completed or deleted. I don't typically see us deleting that, but if the person that owned the pet maybe moved or the pet died or something like that, we could mark it as completed here. The text is a little bit more detail on these projects than what I'm going over here, so make sure to read through that section as well. In chapter 3, we took a look at our products and services list, and now I'm going to look at that again. Several different ways to get to it. You can search for it up top here. You can click on the gear icon and find it in your list. I'm going to use the search in this case. So products and services. Oops. There it is. So you can see we've already entered several services. These are all services. We see that through the type column here. As I mentioned previously, the product and service list is a time-saving feature so that we don't have to continually re-enter the same products and service information each time we record a new sales transaction. QBO uses 4 types of products and services, and we can see that when we create a new item in this list. You can see that we can create a service, which we did several times. So we do that when we perform a service for our customer on a repetitive basis. We can indicate the name of that service. We can map what revenue account, what income account it goes to. If we charge the same price every single time, we can populate the service with that information as well. We can also create inventory items in the product service list. So inventory are products that we sell for which we track quantities. So if Mookie the Beagle decides that it wants to move on from just being a service-based business and also sell products, we could add an inventory item here. Maybe they start selling dog food or dog hammocks or something like that down the road. Non-inventory items in the products and service list are products that we sell but we don't need to track the quantity of the product. An example might be vet supplies that we use when we're providing pet care services. So maybe we don't track the individual gauze that we use when we're helping a pet out. A bundle is a collection of products and services that we sell together. So if we needed to add a new product or service, we hit on the new button and we decide what we're adding. Is it a service? Is it an inventory item that we're going to be tracking quantity? Is it something we sell but we don't track quantity? Is it a combination of products and or services? And then also earlier in chapter 3, I showed you that we can import a list from a CSV or an Excel file as long as the file's formatted in a way that's acceptable to QuickBooks. The chapter does ask us to create a new service. So I'm going to click on New, select Service, and this one is going to be called Custom Pet Food Preparation. We don't have a SKU for the item. It does have a category that falls into, it's going to fall into pet wellness. We do sell this service to our customers, and we have a lengthy description provided by the text. I'm going to type that in. So even though these descriptions provided by the text are lengthy, they do serve a benefit to the business. When the employees are creating invoices or recording other sales transactions in QBO, the description gives a little bit more context about what the product service list item is. That way they're more likely to select the correct item from the product and service list on the sales form. We do have a set price that we charge for this service. It's provided in the text at $330. And then we want to make sure that our income account is being mapped to our 4,200 sales income account. We do not purchase this service from a vendor, so we leave this box unchecked. And now I'm going to hit Save and Close. So now we're going to work through a couple of transaction workflows related to our customers. So the first one, I'm going to mouse over our Create button. I'm looking in the Customers column, and we're going to use the Sales Receipt form. And remember that the Sales Receipt form is used when the customer pays at the point of sale. In other words, a cash sale. Alright, so this one I'm looking at the text and getting the details from there. The customer is Sherry Bryan and her pet is Maggie. And the date of the transaction is January 18th, 2025. The payment method, she paid us in the form of a check, and that informs what we have to do here. So if we were paid in a way that immediately hit our checking account, we would keep this at our 1001 checking account. But she's paying us in the form of a check, so we're going to have to bring that check into the bank, or at least electronically deposit it. So we can't show an increase to our checking account yet. Instead, we're going to deposit to the 1,600 payments to deposit account for the time being until we drop off that check and deposit it into our bank account. All right, got that. So now we're going to indicate what products or services we provided to Maggie. And according to the book, we've got pet care short visit. Just looking for a short visit there. And let's see, the quantity for that was 2. You can see the rate filled, and then when I put in that quantity, it updates the amount. And let's see if there's any other details. Okay, nope. So it looks like that's it for this sales receipt. So now I'm going to hit the save button. And once I do that, now I can click on more and I can see the transaction journal. And a sales receipt is used for a cash sale. So when we look at the journal entry, it'll reflect that. We are going to see a credit to our revenue account here, which is going to increase our revenue accounts, 4,200 sales. And then we see a debit, which is increased to our payments to deposit account. This is essentially our cash account. Think back to our principles of accounting class. We call it payments to deposit because Sherry paid us in the form of a check. We are going to have to deposit that in our checking account, but we haven't yet, so thus payments to deposit it. Then the next step of this workflow is going to actually record that deposit. That's going to decrease this payments to deposit account and increase the balance of our checking account. So to do that, we mouse over Create, we go over to the other column, select Bank Deposit, and we can see that payment that we haven't deposited showing up here. So at the top though, we got to make sure, hey, where are we depositing? To our 1001 checking account. Yep, that's what we got there. And make sure the date of the deposit is correct. Per the book, it is on the 18th that we're dropping it off at the bank. We're going to check this box to show that we are depositing it. We can see the total showing up here, $160, which is the amount from that previous sales receipt transaction. And now we're going to select Save and Close. To see that journal entry, I'm going to click up top for the search, and I can see it show up if I give it a moment under the recent transaction. So there's the deposit that we just recorded. I'm going to click on it. And now that I've done that, I'm going to hit the More button. I'm going to look at the transaction journal, and I'm going to see the journal entry behind the scenes of that screen. And we see here that the payments to deposit account was credited. That's an asset account, so that's a decrease to that asset. And then the balance of the checking account is being debited. That's also an asset. That's an increase to the balance of the checking account because we just put more funds in there. That makes sense. So now we're going to work through a workflow related to invoices. So we're going to mouse over Create, and under the Customers column, select Invoice. And once again, remember that invoices are used when you provided the goods or service to the customer, but they haven't paid you yet. They owe you. So that's going to involve an increase to your revenue, but also an increase to your accounts receivable. And the accounts receivable is there because you need to keep track of the fact that that customer owes you more money when you send out invoices. So when we pull up this invoice, the first thing I'm going to do is select my customer. This invoice is going to Joseph Asher for their pet Cal. So I select Cal. You can see it's going to be billed to the human pet owner. And now I'm going to take a look at the terms and the due date. So it says to select net 30. It's already there. And then the date of the transaction is January 18th. So I could change that if I needed to, but I didn't. And because the terms were 30 days, the due date is 30 days from the 18th. It looks like the system calculated that correctly. The next thing we're going to do is indicate the services that we provided for Cal. And it looks like in the text that we did a vet visit. The quantity is 1. You can see that the rate and the amount auto-filled. And now we are going to save the transaction, and then I'm going to hit the More Actions button to look at the transaction journal. We're going to see the debits and credits here. So just recorded an invoice, which is a credit sale. We've done the work, but we haven't got the money. Therefore, we have to show an increase, a debit to our asset accounts receivable to show the customer owes us more money, and an increase to our revenue through the credit there. So once again, it's really important to try to see how these forms relate to your prior accounting knowledge. It's going to help you understand what we're doing a lot better if you can tie that in. Next, we're going to record the receipt of the payment from Joseph Asher for this invoice. Several different ways to do that. We could go back to the project screen and do it from there, but I'm just going to do it from the Create button here. So we've got the workflow here. So we just created the invoice. Now we're going to receive payment from that invoice. The first thing we have to do here is select the customer that we're receiving the payment from. That was Joseph Asher. And we want to show that it was for the pet Cal though, so I'm going to select Cal here. And we can see the different invoices that have already been recorded for this customer and pet listed down below. Today, per the book, we are just collecting on the most recent invoice, which was this $260 one. So I'm going to check the box next to that. For the payment date here, we have the 18th of January per the book. The payment method that Joseph Asher is using is credit card. And because we are being paid with the credit card, the funds are going to be automatically deposited to the checking account, and we do not need to select the payments to deposit in this case. If Joseph Asher had paid us in the form of cash or maybe through a personal check, then we would have selected the payments to deposit account here, and then we would have had an additional step in the workflow because we would have had to record the subsequent bank deposit. But in this case, he paid in the form of a credit card, and we're having the funds automatically placed into our checking account through that. So now I'm going to select Record and Close. And then I'm going to click in the search box up here. I'm going to look at the recent transactions. That was a receipt of payment. It shows up as payment here. We can see it from Cal. We had the invoice of $260 and then the payment from Cal of $260. So I'm going to select that one. And now that I've done that, I'm going to hit the More button, look at the transaction journal. So when we receive funds from a credit sale, that's going to reduce our accounts receivable. The customer owes us less. So we see a credit, which is a reduction in an asset. And then we also see the debit hitting our checking account, which is an increase to our checking account because we got the funds. At this point, I'm going to go outside of the text a tiny bit here, and I'm going to run a report. So I'm mousing over reports, going to standard reports, and I am going to pull up an aging of accounts receivable here. So I just typed in aging in the search there. I see accounts payable aging, and then I see accounts receivable aging. I'm going to go with the detail because it's going to show individual invoices that way. And we see here the invoices that are still owed to us as of the timing of this report. Now, what it's doing here is it's pulling the system date from my computer. Now, hypothetically speaking, we're looking at these transactions in January, so the as of date probably should be reflecting January because it looks like these are really past due. But let's just pretend for a minute that's, let's say it's January 18th, because I think that was the last transaction we recorded. So you say, oh, yep, looks, those accounts are still current. They're not due until February. And those are the only invoices that are outstanding. So all of our accounts receivable is in this current category. Now, if you've taken our Principles of Accounting 1 course here, you have studied the concept of uncollectible accounts, the idea that if you extend credit to customers, that they don't always end up paying you everything that they owe you. So if your business is using the accrual basis of accounting, you're going to have to estimate those bad debts. And there's a couple different methods that companies can use to do that. Section 510 briefly discusses that. You should read through it, but I'm not going to actually ask you to make adjusting entries to estimate those bad debts. Those estimates are made at the end of the period as part of the adjusting process so that we can produce accurate and complete financial statements. Moving on in the text, now I'm in the section that's labeled Mookie Exercises 5 in the book. And what I'm doing now is I'm going to add another project. So I'm going to mouse over my apps, go to projects, and then projects again, and I'm going to click on new project. The name of this project is the name of a pet. It's Ozzy, and then the customer is you. Congratulations, Ozzy's your pet. So from the list here, select your own name. I'm going to select my name there, and then I'm going to save this pet into the system. So that if I go back and hit this All Projects button, I'll see all 4 pets in the system as well as their owners. Got some details on the incomes and costs for each pet. Next, we're going to record an invoice that's related to Ozzy. So since we're on the project screen, we can do that from this screen. Alternatively, you could go to create and just do an invoice there, so you don't have to do it from this screen, but the text is asking us to do it, so I will. So I'm going to click on Ozzy because the invoice is for Ozzy. I'm going to click add to project, and from there I'm going to select invoice, and the form pre-populates with Ozzy because on the Ozzy project already when I selected that. The date of this invoice is January 19th, and let's see, what did we do? Well, actually, the terms were not net 30. They were due on receipt per the book. And looks like we did vet visit urgent care. Uh-oh. Wow, he's okay. All right, select that. And the quantity was 2. The amount auto-calculated. And now I'm going to save. If I wanted to, I can click more actions and look at the journal entry. I'm going to see an increase in accounts receivable because it was an invoice. The customer owes me because they haven't paid me, and also an increase to our income, our revenue account as well, because we did the work. So now I'll close out of the invoice. I'm still in the Ozzy project screen, and now I'm doing the next workflow related to this. I am going to add to project. Now that we've recorded the invoice, now the receive payment for that invoice makes sense. So let's do that. All right, so I see that the customer is already pre-populated with Ozzy there, and because of that, the invoice that we just created is showing up. I'm going to check that box. It looks like we are being paid in full, so I'm not going to change the amount there. And it looks like the payment method was in the form of a credit card, and because of that, the funds are automatically being placed in our checking account, so I don't need to change that. The date of this payment, though, is the 21st. And now I'm going to record the transaction. Now if I hit record, the more button appears, and then I can look at the journal entry. We've already looked at one of these already though. It's going to decrease the account receivable because we're collecting on an invoice, so the customer owes us less, and then the account that would be debited would be our checking account, which is an increase to our checking account because we just deposited to it. Now I'm going to close out of this window. And now we can see those details here under the Aussie project, the invoice, and then the payment from that invoice. Now the text has us going back to the Customer Hub. So mouse over My Apps, go to Customer Hub, and then Customers. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add some details in for the Carlos Hafra customer. So I'm going to click on his name, and now I'm going to click the Edit button, which is going to allow me to enter some contact information. So it looks like we have a phone number and an address. So now I have that information entered into the system here, so I'm going to hit save. So now I'm on that customer screen still for Carlos Hafra, and because I'm there in the Customer Hub on that particular customer screen, I can hit new transaction and I can enter whatever transaction I need to related to them, and we're going to sales receipt, so I'm going to do that. Alternatively, you could also go to create and do the sales receipt from there as well. It doesn't matter. This is going to save a minute because it's going to put the customer's name in. But it doesn't put the pet actually though, so I do need to still click on this and make sure that we're using the pet's name here. So we want to have the tracking per pet. Alright, so I'm doing a sales receipt. That's what the book asked us to do. So in other words, we're doing a cash sale here, and the date of the transactions January 21. The payment method they told us was a check, and it looks like the reference number of the check is 3033. Now the text actually says to deposit to the checking account directly here, which I don't really like because the customer paid us in the form of a check. So typically when that happens, when the payment's in the form of cash or a check, we would teach you to record to the payments to deposit account, and then we'd record the subsequent deposit. But because I want to make sure that I'm consistent with the textbook's check figures, I'm going to follow what they did here. Perhaps what happened is that we took a photo of the check and we got into our banking app on our phone and we immediately deposited at that moment. But still, I like to see the workflow and the audit trail a little bit more clearer. Anytime that I receive payment from a customer in form of a check or cash, I'm hitting the payments to deposit account. Even if I immediately do the deposit, I'm still following that workflow. But we're going to go with what the book did, just to be consistent with the check figures. And now we have to indicate what product or service we provided. It looks like it was extended wellness. Once again, they use the word extended in there. You got to be careful not selecting the incorrect one. Extended wellness is what it was. The quantity was 72. And now that I've entered that quantity in there, the system is auto-calculated, and it looks to be a very large sum there. However, this one I can see a lot of students making an error with because it says that because of the number of hours needed, the business has worked out an arrangement with the customer where we're going to give them the service for a discounted rate. So we are not going to use the auto-filled rate here. The text says that we've agreed to a $100 rate. So I'm going to type that in, and if I click outside that box, it auto-calculates the amount using that updated rate, and that matches the key here. So now I am going to save the transaction. And since we just recorded a sales receipt, we can look at the journal entry by hitting more and then transaction journal. Now a sales receipt's a cash sale, so that's always going to increase our income account, our revenue account, and it's also going to either increase our checking account or maybe the payments to deposit account, depending on what we selected here. And even though we got paid in the form of a check and the best practice would be going to payments deposit, the book went to checking, so I just followed it. So that's going to be our debit. We're going to be increasing the balance of checking, which we'll see here in just a second. And sure enough, that's what we see. We see a credit, which is an increase to our income account, and we see a debit, which is also an increase, but rather to our asset account, our checking account. All right, so our next transaction is another sales receipt. So to pull that up, I'm going to mouse over Create, and from the customer column, I'm going to select Sales Receipt. And the customer in this case is Bella again. The date of this transaction is January 29th. And let's see, the payment method is a check again. And the reference number for the check was 3042. And even though we got paid in the form of a check again, they're still going to the checking account, which once again I would advise to go to the payments to deposit and then record that subsequent deposit. But just to be consistent with the book, I'm going to follow their instruction and select that. Intense Wellness is what the service was. It was a quantity of 33. It looks like this intensive wellness is really profitable for us. Extended wellness, intensive wellness. Wow. All right, and now we're going to save the transaction again. And we already just looked at a similar transaction, so we're not going to take a look at the journal. I'm just going to close it out. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to update our customer list again. So mouse over My Apps, Customer Hub, then Customers. And I'm going to click on Joseph Asher, and then I'm going to edit his record in our system. And we're going to enter the contact information because we don't have it in here. So now that I got his details into the system, I'm going to save his customer record. Don't need to save it to my computer though. And now I'm going to record an invoice for this customer. So I'm going to mouse over Create. I'm going to go to Invoice, and from the drop down I'm going to select Joseph Asher's pet Cal, and the invoice date is January 21. Terms apparently didn't change, so I'm not going to do anything there. And now I have several different services I have to indicate. So the first one is transport. The next one is errand. Oh, that was a quantity of 1, as is errand. And then the third and final one is medium visit. Medium wellness. Tempting to click on that one. Where'd that go? Medium visit. There it is. And then the quantity for that is 4. Alright, so then you can see that the amounts auto-filled and that one recalculated based on the quantity. We've got a total here. I am going to save it. And then we've looked at the journal entry several times. This is an invoice, so it'll increase accounts receivable and increase revenue. Just going to close it out. So now we're going to record another invoice. So I'm going to mouse over Create, select Invoice. This invoice is for Joseph Asher's pet Cal again. The date of this invoice is January 23rd. And the details on the service, we have several services, look like 4 of them. First one's transport. Quantity is 1. The next one is medium visit. Quantity was 4. The next one was transport again. Quantity of 1 again. And then the final one is extended visit. And get that right at the top. The quantity here was 5. And once I hit the 5 and click out of it, you can see that the amount auto-calculated. And now I can save the transaction. And if I wanted, I hit more actions and look at the transaction journal. This is an invoice. It's going to increase accounts receivable. It's going to increase income. So I'm just going to close it out. So now we're going to receive a payment from Joseph Asher for his pet cow for one of these outstanding invoices. We can see that one of the invoices had been paid for, but there are 3 others that haven't been paid for. Now we're collecting on one of them. So to do that, I'm going to mouse over Create. I'm going to go to Receive Payment, which has to happen after invoices were already recorded. And now we're going to select from the list Cal, Joseph Asher's pet. We're going to record the date of the receipt of payment, which is January 23rd. The payment method is check. Because they're paying in the form of a check, we are going to properly change this to payments to deposit. And we are going to select the invoice that we're collecting on. It's that earliest invoice there. And now that amount shows here, they're paying us in full, so we don't modify that. We could modify that if they paid us lesser amount or something, but they didn't. And let's see what else here. I think that was all the detail. So now we're going to hit record. And then if we wanted, we hit more and take a look at the transaction journal. Now a receive payment screen is always going to reduce accounts receivable, and then it's also going to increase either the payments to deposit account or the balance of checking, depending on what we selected here. In this case, the payments to deposit account is going to be debited because it's going to increase because we just got that check. I'm going to close this screen out now. And now under the Joseph Asher customer transaction list here, we can see that that subtraction, that payment from his accounts receivable there. And finally, because of the workflow here, we originally recorded that invoice, increased accounts receivable, increased revenue. Then we decreased accounts receivable through that last transaction with the receive payment window screen. We decreased accounts receivable and increased payments deposit because he paid in the form of a check. Now we're going to deposit that check in our bank. So mouse over create, go to bank deposit. You can see the account that we're depositing to is our checking account. Make sure the bank deposit's recorded on the right date. It looks like it's the 23rd, so that's good. We can see that that check is showing up here. I'm going to check the box, and the amount populates here and here. And let's see, we're going to save and close. And if we wanted to see that transaction in its journal entry, we could come up here and give it a moment. We'll see that deposit, and then we could pull it up. We can hit that more button, transaction journal, and then we can see the debits and credits behind that. And what we're going to see there is an increase to our checking account because we just deposited to it, and a decrease to our payments to deposit. With that credit there, it's an asset, so it decreases on the credit side. The next thing we're going to do is pull up our projects list. So we're going to mouse over my apps, go to projects, and then projects again. And here we have all of the projects listed. We do have filters at the top here, so we could just look at the ones that have been completed or canceled and so on. But it says to make sure that in progress is checked. All of our pet projects are in progress right now, so didn't really do anything. That was the default. And we can see the incomes, and no costs have been associated with them in the system, but we see incomes for all the different pets so far. What they want us to do next is they wanted us to create an Excel file with the details here. So if I hit the share button, it's going to download an Excel file to my computer. I can open it up there, and I can see the same details. Alright, so the final thing that we have to do that's in the text here is run a couple of reports. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to mouse over reports, I'm going to go to standard reports, and we're going to do an aging of account receivable again. So up here at the top, I'm going to type in aging. And this time they wanted it in summary, which isn't going to show the individual invoices, it'll just show the customers. I'm going to click on that. And then the as of date, we're going to do it at the end of January per the book. And we can see that all of our customers are showing up as having invoices that are current. These columns here are our past due columns. None of the invoices are past due yet. So the total balance of our accounts receivable is $3,840, and we can see the breakdown of which customers owe us that. And then finally, the text asks us to run a general ledger report. You can get there and going to standard reports and browsing for it. Although we've already, if you followed my previous videos, created a custom report. I'm going to select that one because it's already there. And here it is. I changed the dates to all dates because a lot of students make errors with the dates. And if we pull up the all dates general ledger report, we can see if there's any date errors pretty quickly. So if you didn't create that custom report previously, you can go up here to this drop down and change the dates to all dates, and I suggest that. The book says to do it as a particular date in January, but that wouldn't help us find if you had any date errors necessarily. So we're going to look through the list here and look for any dates that are outside of January 2025. I don't see any there, so it looks like I may not have the dates spot on, but I have the dates within the correct month at least. And now that I've done that, I'm looking at these balances and I'm comparing them against my keys. So the balances of the accounts in bold at the bottom there, so the total for the checking account here, and just sort of scrolling down the list there. It looks like all of these balances so far are matching my answer key. So yep, they all do. So you can check your balances in Mookie against these ones and see how you did. So one last thing that I wanted to do real quick is do something that's actually outside of the textbook just a little bit, and that's to take a look at the App Store inside of QuickBooks Online. So in the discussion this week, I'm asked you to take a look at some of the apps that are available and write about a cool one that you find. And there's a URL there that can get you directly to the App Store. If you're in QBO, if you come up here, you can click on this My Integrations button, and then you can click on Find Integrations to look through the different apps. And what I'm going to have us do today is look at a couple of different importing apps, because what I've found, and I found it by helping a friend last summer, their business had transitioned into using QBO from a different accounting software, and they had these really lengthy customer lists, and the QuickBooks Online does have the ability to import customer lists from a CSV or Excel file, but the fields that you can import are limited, which I found sort of funny because the fields are contained within QuickBooks Online, but we couldn't import information into all of those fields. And I want to take a look at that again because I haven't looked at that for a while. I'm going to come back here in a minute to the apps page. I just want to sort of look at the import for customer lists real quick. So to do that, mouse over My Apps, go to Customer Hub, and then select Customers. And then if I want to bring in a list, I click on this drop down, select Import Customers. And now what I want to do is I want to look at the sample file for the customer list and see what fields are allowed to be brought in. Yeah, it looks pretty limited in terms of the columns that are listed here in this file. We've got, maybe 10, 15 of them if I count them. But one particular field that was problematic for my friend's business is they had extensive notes they wanted to keep for each customer, and they didn't want to have to do manual data entry because there were hundreds of these customers with lengthy notes, and we don't want to have to type that all in or paste that all in individually for each individual customer. So we were looking at different solutions. And to elaborate just a little bit more about what I'm talking about in terms of fields here, I'm talking about these columns like name, company, email, etc. You can see that they're fairly limited. There aren't that many of them. But when you look at the QBO software and you go to manually enter a new customer, you can see there's a lot more fields here. And you scroll down, there's even more like notes and so on. So you can't enter information through the import into all of these different fields. And like I said, the notes one was the deal breaker for my friend's business. So what we're going to do here is we're going to practice using the App Store. So once again, to get there, I'm going to close out of this pane and I'm going to click on My Integrations and then Find Integrations. And I'm going to do a search here for different import tools. So typing the word import, hitting enter, and I see several of them. So my friend and I spent some time researching the different apps that were available here, and several of them seem like they work, but the one that we landed on and the one that I am going to have you try out is this one called Bulk Import Export Excel by Sasan Transactions. And if I click on that, I get a little bit more detail about it. There's a video that talks about how it works and so on. And then the reason why I'm going to use this one for the class is because it has a free trial. Now the free trial wouldn't work for my friend's business because she had many more rows in her customer list than what the trial allowed. But for our purposes, I've got a CSV file that has I think 25 rows in it, and that will allow us to do this for our company here. So in our file, you're going to find that in the Canvas course. So if you go to our course in Canvas and go to course resources, I've got them here under data files, and it's for chapter 5. And I've got the one for Mookie the Beagle here, the customer list import. And then also, I'm going to have you do the same thing with Hafra Cyber. At the end of your activity in chapter 5 for Hafra Cyber, I'm going to have you import a customer list there as well to demonstrate that you could do it. And I'll have you use the same app for that as well. So right now I'm just going to download the Mookie the Beagle import by hitting that arrow. It puts it in my downloads folder. And now I'm back to the home page of my Mookie the Beagle company in QuickBooks here, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on my initial in the top right, and then I'm going to select manage your Intuit account. What I have to do is I have to verify my email before we do this app. So to do that, I'm going to select sign in security, and then here's my email address. Now yours is going to show your GRCC email address, your student email address. I had to use a generic one here. And I'm going to select verify email, and then I'm going to send a verification email there, and then I'm going to go into that email account, and I have this email, and I'm going to select this button to verify my email address, and it looks like yep, I verified my email. So continue, and then I'm going to close this tab out. So now go back to my Mookie the Beagle QuickBooks homepage here, go back to the integrations, clicking this button, selecting find integrations. I'm going to search again for the word import. I'm going to hit enter, and there's the one I want, the bulk import export Excel SASANT transactions. So now I should be ready to do this. I'm going to select get integration now. And here we go. So connecting the tool to Mookie the Beagle. We're getting a terms and conditions here. So there's some data that can be shared between the two, and we would want to run this by your company's management before you would just go do this for your company. You might have an attorney at your company. They might want to review this in detail. My friend did that, and they ended up going with it. So we're just, and this is for a class, so we're just going to connect. But in real life, that's definitely something to concern yourself with, but I'm just going to connect for this purpose. All right, it worked. So now I got to make a choice here. How do you plan to use SASANT transactions? I am going to select I want to manage my own QuickBooks account. And the next, we're seeing the name of the company. You're also going to do this for Hafra Cyber as well. So we'll look at what that looks like. It should be very similar in a moment, and get started. And let's see, we can take a tour if you want. I'm just going to select later, and I'm going to close this window out. And we're in the free trial for this. We have 29 days remaining. We're also limited as to how many rows we can import. I think I mentioned that earlier. The file that I have you importing is within those limits, but if you were actually doing this in real life, you might need to buy a subscription. My friend did, because we needed to import a lot more rows than what we have here today. So what we're going to do here is a bulk upload. So we're going to start your import, and then I'm looking at these different types of lists or transactions that I can import, and I'm going to scroll down to lists, and what we are bringing into the system is a customers list. So I'm going to select that, and here's where we'll browse for that file that we downloaded earlier from the Canvas page. So browse for files. I've got it in my downloads folder there, and let's see, it's the chapter 5 Mookie the Beagle customer list import. Select that, continue. Alright, so now we are going to start creating mapping. What that means is that we're going to basically take the column labels, the headers, and map them to the fields that are in QuickBooks. So we're going to look at the names of the fields in QuickBooks and match them to the names in our CSV file there. And the tool will automatically try to map them for us, and get a little error message because it says the display name field is mandatory and it didn't auto map it. You don't see a field here, and we don't see like a green check mark. So what I'm going to do is click on this little drop down, and the display name is going to be the company name, and it's just company in our CSV. So I'm going to select that, and let's see. I'm going to do stuff with address, but I'm going to go down the list here. Okay, so it did find some of the fields. So in QuickBooks, it's called phone, and our CSV file was also called phone, and same thing with mobile and fax and so on. So it did find some of the fields that we needed. Yep, and then the notes one, that was the deal breaker for my friend. So it looks like we have most of what we need here, just it wasn't finding display name as from company. We had to manually tell it that, and it looks like for some reasons it's not finding the addresses either. So we got the billing address line 1, so that's just probably going to be like street address. Yep, street. And then we got city, we should have that. Surprised I didn't find that one. City, postal code, let's see, that's probably zip maybe. Yep. Country, we should have that. Surprised I didn't find that either. And then state, also surprised. There it is. And then I guess we don't have a different address for shipping, so I'll bring those same pieces of information in there. So street, city, zip, country, and state. We got some accounts that opening balances, so we got those in. Okay, so we are going to save and continue. And now what we see up top are the names in QuickBooks in dark black, and then the names in our CSV file below. So the reason I remember that is because display name as we said was company. And if I scroll over, I see they're all lining up. And then there's the lengthy notes that sort of replicate the situation that I saw earlier. So it looks like all these are about to be brought into our system. So I'm going to select upload. And it might take a moment or two to bring that in. Being prompted to purchase something. You might need it right now. And okay, it was successful. We had 25 customers come into the system with 0 errors. So now I'm going to show the results. And I got them all in there. So can verify that now by closing out this tab and then going back into our QuickBooks. So I'm just going to delete that part of the URL, hit enter, get me back into my home page. And now if I go to my apps, Customer Hub, customers, I should see a whole bunch of them in there. Yep, and then I can click on any one of them, and if I look up here, I see those lengthy notes in there. So just sort of give you a taste of what the App Store is like and how to connect an app. You'll do a little discussion this week, and you'll take a look at the different apps that are out there and do a little write-up about that. There's some really cool ones, especially for connecting to different systems or other marketplaces and things like that. There's some pretty cool stuff. I am noticing one thing here that I'm going to need to modify in the file that you upload is that I did put a beginning balance in for at least this company, and that would affect your account balances in the system. So I don't want that, so I'll end up making these all 0. So just ignore that little flaw there in my file. But you're going to basically do the same thing with your Hafra Cyber company. So to do Chapter 5 with Hafra Cyber, I want you to go through the textbook activities first, and then when you're done, I want you to import the Hafra Cyber company list that I have placed in Canvas under our course resources area. And if you remember to switch over the company, you would just go up to this gear icon, switch company, select Hafra Cyber, and you're in. And when you get to that step to import the customer list, wait till the end to do it, but you go to integrations again, and then find integrations, search for import again, find the one that we used earlier, the SASANT bulk import export Excel tool, get integration now, connect it to Hafra Cyber. Look for this confirmation here, connect, and we're in there as well. So then we're basically the same process, bulk upload, bring your data in. All right, if you need my help at all, don't hesitate to ask. We can set up a Zoom meeting or an on-campus meeting. You can share your screen, or you can come in and I can look over your shoulder and we can help you through this. Let me know how I can assist.